So good afternoon again. My name is Anna. I'm representing the Golda Meir Mashaf Carmel Training Center. Most of you know this center as MCTC. MCTC was founded in 1961 by two visionary women, former Prime Minister Golda Meir, then she was Minister of Foreign Affairs, and Mina Ben-Zvi, MCTC founding director. MCTC work within the framework of Mashaf, Israeli Agency for International Development Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are conducting training activities for women mainly from all around the globe. Three main areas of study of MCTC are sustainable community development, entrepreneurship and innovation, and early childhood education, all with gender as cross-cutting issue. Since the beginning of Corona crisis, we work online as most of the organizations worldwide, and I'm happy that you joined this session on women's political involvement in crisis intervention. Before we start this session, and I'll give the floor to our lecturer, few words on technical stuff. So first of all, we recording this lecture. So those of you who don't want to be filmed and famous, please turn off your cameras. If you anyway won't be there, so just stay on. Later on, you will find this lecture on MCTC YouTube channel. We will mute all the participants during the session. That means that you need to use chat to ask your questions. I will collect them, and at the end of this session, I'll be your voice to ask your questions. And our lecturer will answer. And I'll put the mail of our lecturer, Dr. Orit Rishpi, on the chat, so those of you who will need to contact her later directly can do this. Now, let me introduce you Dr. Orit Rishpi, Israeli lawyer that holding central positions in Israel arena. She is the director of the Israeli Metropolitan Train National Company. She's a chairperson of the Central Land Planning Committee. And the most important, she is a co-founder of WEPOWER. It's a non-profit NGO for the enhancement of women to politics and decision-making positions. Orit worked with us for a number of years in the programs on women's political empowerment. And I give the floor to this wonderful person. So Orit, please start.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the generous introduction, and I'm very glad to be here with CTC, who are doing amazing things in my opinion, and are giving us the opportunity to meet women from other places, to learn what other countries are doing. And I'm sure you know, because all of you who are sitting here together with us now have been exposed to other countries and other projects. So we are learning, we're in the process of learning. And maybe I want actually to jump to one of the final comments that I normally like to make, which is a logical conclusion or a logical closure to a meeting like this. And that would be that beyond everything that we do, and things that we have to do and we all are doing in our different countries, different things, still what we have to remember is that we need to accelerate. We are all busy with programs, we are all busy with training, we're researching, we're studying, but one of the strange conclusions that I have come to in the past year or 2 years, after having met women from all over the world and projects from all over the world, we need to step up and to move faster, because we've been doing women equality projects for the last 100 years and we're not there yet. So one of my bottom line comments is always, let's hurry, let's not take our time. Now, saying that, we still need to do things as we move along. And the reason that I'm here with you today is that in WePower, we indeed put together thinking and women and a lot of energy in order to make things happen, faster. In the past 20 years, I don't think we accelerated enough. Things didn't happen as fast as we expected them to happen. And at some points, we even stepped a little bit backwards, which is very, very disappointing. But at the same time, it seems to be part of life. And on the one hand, we have to accept it. On the other hand, we must not accept it. And as I said, acceleration is always part of our next program. Personally, from the few words that Anna gave you, it wasn't a plan, but I happen to be involved in different entities. Some of them are top management of Israel. Some of them are everyday hard work that everyone has to do. I'm also in the academic world and a lawyer, as Anna mentioned. I really tried to equip myself with tools that would give me not just the ability, but also a sort of a moral backbone to really stand up and say what I really think, to say it loud and clear, and to be very strong about it. A sort of to cover myself just in case somebody questions what I have to say. What did we decide to do after learning and after making mistakes in WEPOWER? WEPOWER, first of all, is indeed an association that was established by mostly, the first lady was Michal Yudin, and I joined her. And we understood that we need to focus on women for politics, not just the general gender issues and the gender gap, but specifically for politics. Politics was the most deserted and most unequal area. It still is in Israel, a very bad area for women equality, but nevertheless, we made some very significant progress. We made some very influential programs. And indeed, in areas where we were active, we did see positive, significant results. Just to mention one small point that I will show with the presentation in a few minutes. For example, local governments that are still in a very bad situation concerning men and women representation. Areas or specific localities where we acted as WEPOWER, doing our thing, which I'll show in a few minutes. We had a significant raise in the number of women that were actually elected for the city council. And this is actually the best result that we could hope for. We also targeted mayors. With mayors, things are moving much more slowly than we would like them to be. We had the previous elections, we started off with 6 mayors. The last round of elections in 2018, we ended up with 14 mayors. So in terms of percentage, it's a lot, but in terms of reality, it's still very little. So depends how you analyze the results, but surely we are looking forward. Anna, if you start the presentation, I will go with the presentation. It will be clearer and more organized. So let's move to the first slide, Anna. Anna? We lost Anna? Thank you. Okay, no, we can skip this one. This is our wonderful logo of 50% of a circle and 50% men, 50% women. Thank you. So first of all, in terms of numbers of population, that the majority in Israel is women. Anna, we can move to the next one. Just to get a small picture in numbers. members of Knesset, we have 28.3%. In terms of numbers, it's usually out of 120, the most that we had was 35 Knesset members. We went down a little bit in the last round of elections. I'm going to the 13. 13 is the percentage of publicly elected women in local authorities. The number may have gone up a little bit because of some personal changes, but basically we're talking a very small percentage. Mayors, so we have 14 mayors out of 257 city council members or local authorities in Israel, which means we are doing very badly in that area. And personally, I'm an expert on local governments. I believe local governments are the basis for many, many aspects of life. Two of the most important aspects, first of all, are democracy. We don't have democracy if we don't have democratic local governments. And the second issue to do with local governments is, of course, that when you open the door in the morning and you get prepared to go out of the house alone or with your children, your local authority hits you in the face with air quality, traffic, gardening, you name it. Local governments are extremely important and I think underestimated when it comes to talking about democracy and quality of life. The next number on the slide, the 19, is women on boards in public companies. Public companies, when we have traded companies, the ones in the stock market, where the numbers of women on the boards is also very, very, very shameful. We have some legislation that tried to solve some of these issues, but the legislation is going very slowly. We are now trying to promote again a 50-50 legislation, which is not being accepted very happily. And this has to do with traded companies, the stock market. We all understand that traded companies are public companies. And as a matter of fact, it's amazing that the situation is like this and lawsuits haven't managed to solve this. Coming to the bottom number, which is the 0, actually, I think this morning or yesterday, one woman was appointed as the general manager of actually the most important bureau, the most important office in the government, which is the finance office. So actually, I can send greetings from here to Mrs. Karen Turner Eyal, who was appointed as our first and today only general manager of the governmental office, and it is the biggest office. Let's move to the next slide and see a few other numbers in the public sector. Working women, we have a majority of 65. Educated with first degree, again, 70%. In intermediate government management, we have 40%. Top management, again, a minority of about 13%. And CEOs of local authorities, again, a very small number, 12%. It may be changed here and there by small bits of the numbers. What WEPOWER, actually, we can move on and let's see. Okay, this is really showing in a nutshell, of course, what we decided to do after trial and error, after trying to understand. It took us about, I think, a good 5, 6, 7 years from when we started. We started 20 years ago, and in the beginning, we put a lot of energy into educational programs, trying to convince the schools to adopt gender equality training programs for children, understanding what all of us here, I'm sure, understand, that the real long-term solution would be education. But we also felt that we didn't really have time to take 30% of the educating 3 generations and hopefully get to the correct, good, equal reality. Therefore, we decided we needed to speed up and come out with a different strategy. And this slide actually represents our main understanding, which is number 1 is locating, training, and networking. What we do is we actually go out there, we look for the women that seem to be interested, that already have some kind of a beginning of leadership or training into local governments, into parents' committees, into neighborhood, all kinds of organizations, into caring of what's happening around where they live, and that they show ability and interest in moving forward. We locate these women. We put together a few training programs that were built based on experience and consulting from women like myself, from other men and women that are involved in training for leadership, for training for community leadership, and a lot of knowledge that was missing and still is missing went into gender knowledge, to really know the facts, to really know that in reality, this and this is the percentage, the shameful percentage of, let's say in Israel 2 years ago, there was not even one general manager of a hospital, and the majority of the doctors are women. But there was not even one general manager of a hospital. Just to imagine that when you look at the facts and you look at the numbers, this is when reality really hits you in a very clear black and white reality. So our first leg, or our first strategy, main strategy, is we locate, we train, and then we have to maintain this a network of women that already have a lot in common and can help each other and help other women to move forward. This is number 1. Number 2, inevitable legislation. This is again going very slowly with very poor results. I think my colleagues at WEPOWER will be angry when I say poor results, because we have moved forward and we're very happy with every step and every progress that we make. But in fact, we can still have parties, for example, in Israel, where they are not obliged to allow women into the party. And women cannot run in certain parties for the parliament. And we have to remember that parties in Israel are financed by the government. And so we have here a situation where a legal entity running for the House of Legislators is actually, in my mind, breaking the law. We haven't been able to come up with a lawsuit that would win that point. But other legislation is moving slowly forward. We are pushing legislation on different terms and different areas so that we have more and more of this. As I said before, the public sector and the stock market are not moving fast enough. Being public companies, traded companies are public companies, where I would expect a 50-50 situation. Where has legislation been very, very effective and very helpful is with the governmental organizations and the governmental companies, where by law there has to be 50-50, and there was also put in the law a monitoring agency that actually stops the ministers from sending men candidates to the board of directors as long as there is not 50-50 men and women. And so what we learned from this is that when we have a legislation that also put in the legislation a monitoring device, it works. It works, and this is, I think, why, for example, I was appointed quite a long time ago to the board of the National Light Train, the Metropolitan Train of Israel, which is the largest infrastructure project in Israel. But I don't know if they would have made any room for women if it wasn't for that legislation. So I'm there and I'm doing a lot of work, and nobody can now say that women are not capable or that we couldn't find the right candidates and blah, blah, blah. It's working beautifully. The third main strategy that we have in WePower to do with our activities is raising awareness. And this is where we put together slogans, facts, research, public meetings, speaking on television, speaking on different programs, organizing panels, organizing campaigns. And here I would like to point out one way that turned out to be very effective for us in WePower and for the results or the progress that we made in local governments in our last round of local elections in 2018. We put together, WePower was heading a lot of cooperation initiatives that put together not one, not two, not three organizations together, but 20 organizations together, 25 and even 30. And I think today even beyond 30, we put together a cooperation that was focused to help women get elected. And we looked at the world, we looked at what we knew and tried to understand exactly what would be most effective to put together 30 feminist organizations, community awareness organizations in order to make a difference. We worked together a campaign, we put the money together, we pooled resources, we pooled abilities on the media, and we actually did, and this actually resulted in more activities that took place by other agencies that even when they were not part of our cooperation program, they still realized that they should do something. They couldn't sit and do nothing. And since there was a big campaign going on, they joined the campaign or came out with their own campaign for women in local governments. And for the Israeli observers, participants here, I'm sure I for sure noticed because I was looking at it and making it every morning, but it really became an issue during the last elections on the general level as well. It was a thing to be discussed. Women, every party, every local list had to put women on the lists and to show off with how many women they have, and that my number 2 is a woman. And there were more lists with number 1s as women as well. And so I think in a way, it affected a little bit like a snowball, because at some stage it was so meaningful that it affected the other people around us. So this is really one of the good examples that I can tell you, very, very effective. And if we jump to the next slide, what are we saying? We are saying that these 4 aspects, if we put them together and we work very hard, we have results. And the results are tricky, just like democracy is tricky, democracy is fragile. Apparently also the success and the results that we have in our activities are fragile. We had some drawbacks. One of the rounds of the parliament elections, we had 3 rounds of the parliament of elections recently. The second round of parliament elections had a little bit less women that we thought would be, but it was corrected later. So what do we need? First of all, as I said, data, knowledge, research, numbers, put in everybody's face. It's not just men that don't understand that there are not women in many places. Just to give you an amazing fact, we have around 12% in Israel, in the public universities, just 12% are a permanent contract women heading the different departments. Just 12% of the women want to have a good, stable, well-paying job in the academic world, in the public universities. All the other 88% of women said, no, don't give us tenure, don't give us research budgets, please, we want to stay on a very fragile part-time position. I don't think that's the situation, but this is the reality. And you were talking, I'm giving you an example, a shameful example of the academic world. So knowledge, we need to know this in order to be able to tackle it and to attack it. And then, of course, we have to have networks of support and of getting together, of networking. We have to maintain these aspects of working together, and they need to be considered as part of what we do. We need to know that when we make a budget, we need to set aside 10, 20, 30, depends on the plans, but we need to set aside a budget to support the support systems and the networks that we need to do. Naturally, we need connections. This means every person who is interested in promoting the situation needs to be well connected, which means hard work. It's not something that you cannot learn or you cannot adopt as a person, but you need to know what's going on, and you need to have your finger in different areas to be able to influence, to be able to know what's going on around you, and to know what the other organizations are doing. There are many feminist or gender equality organizations. Sometimes we step on each other's toes, but we take the time to sort these things out, because in my opinion, the more the merrier. I don't believe we need to try and put, why are all these feminists not getting themselves organized in one organization? Well, because we have different goals and different strategies. Therefore, it's okay. But we need to know we are making sure that we have good connections with the other organizations. We have good connections with male organizations that are very few, but there are also male organizations, and of course, mixed gender is really what we are looking for in order to be able to make a social change. We're talking about, in the end, it's a big, big social change. And inspiration is needed every once in a while. We need to know that when we fail, that when we have an initiative that didn't result the way we resulted, we need to sit down and figure out what happened. And as I said, I have my personal, I share them with my friends today. They already agreed that acceleration is needed, but sometimes it's not about acceleration. Sometimes the inspiration comes in the way of understanding that sometimes we need evolution, not necessarily revolution. When we don't have the time, and I'm a person known for not having the time. I want to move fast. When you want to move fast, you want revolutions. When you want to do a process, you do evolution. Apparently, I have come to the conclusion that we need both strategies. We need people like myself who are pushing for revolutions, demanding results right now, pushing for legislation, going to parliament members, pushing them to the wall and saying, we need this legislation. And they will sit there and explain to me again and again why we need to go in steps because of the old people of the tribe and the old people of this and that, and all these understanding points that we need to make. But at the same time, we don't have the time. And when I meet other people who don't have time and I communicate with them, I am inspired as well. And then I can try and inspire other people to expect better results, not to fall in love with the process, not to fall in love with the fact that we have an organization and we have great training programs, so let's do these training programs for another 20 years. No, once we understand what we need to do, we have to find the fastest way to move and to move. Apparently, or unfortunately, At this stage, nobody can tell us, listen, you can drop the evolution, training, slow strategies altogether because legislation will solve everything and you will manage to have the legislation. This is not the situation. Therefore, we do both, actually. And Anna, if you move to the next slide, we set a goal, which is the UN goal, which is 50-50 by 2030. And I think if we set this goal across the world, even though it's not realistic in many places, and for many sectors in Israel, or I would say areas in Israel, it's also not very realistic. I think as a goal, it's a modest goal. We want to finish this disgrace by 2030. A proper democracy cannot be, otherwise there will not be proper democracies if we don't have 50-50 representation and equality. And I will even say not just equality, but also equity. Women equity. We are worth our existence. We are worth our being, and we are worth who we are. We're worth our weight. We're worth what we have to give. And if we move to the next slide, Anna, as I said, we have some photos of some locations. These are some of the local groups where you see in the center, they're visiting the parliament. We take them to visit other leaders. We interact with other sectors. And indeed, everywhere where we held training programs, where we held enough meetings, more women ran for local authorities and more women were elected to those local authorities. And I think this is our most important lesson. The difficult part is that we need to find the financing, the financial resources to do all of these. Let me tell you that in WEPOWER, most of the activities that we do on the board are voluntary work. We try and get law officers to do help us. We have small budgets. We use these budgets very, very, very carefully. And a very difficult point or part of the financing is when we come to a locality, let's say a regional municipality or a big city, we find it not easy to get the financing for a training course, because in a way, the leaders and the elected leaders of the city are not always too happy to train those who will run against them in the coming elections. Therefore, it's a little bit of a conflict of interest, but we have been successful. We ran courses throughout the country, over 20 courses in the last few years, courses where 20, 25, 30 women participate. And now we know what we are doing. As I said in the beginning, it took us quite a while to understand how we want to work. Now, maybe just a word about yes or not working with education system and with children. The fact that we are not able to finance or to support or to run any programs to do with the school system is a very sad fact. It's too bad that we cannot do this. The program that we had was a very good program, and what was more important than the program itself was the goal of the program, which partially was achieved. And if you can do that, then I think you can do a lot to your country. That is to mainstream gender equality educational programs into the school system. We managed a program for 4 or 5 years, which was extremely tiring and very, very, very complicated. But during these years, we succeeded at least to convince the Ministry of Education to mainstream such programs. Today in Israel, I don't know exactly how many programs are run, but I know of at least 2 programs where students are trained in elementary school and in high school, are trained for gender equality. Now, we all understand, all the people that are here with us today, I'm sure we all understand, once gender equality and gender equity will become mainstream, that would be the success point. Once it's mainstreamed, we can drop all the other hard work that we do and just make it another social issue. Mainstreaming gender equality is a social issue, and inequality for women is a social issue. It's not just something that's on my back and all the women's or the men, I don't see who is here, that we need to carry this because this is our mission and we chose it. No, gender equality is a social issue that has to be handled by men and women. Maybe one last, how are we doing with the time? One last comment. Due to political issues in the parliament, it resulted that a man was chosen to be the head of the committee in the parliament for gender equality. Actually, the committee in the Israeli parliament is still called by a very old name, the status of women. And I called to this candidate, and I also put it in some places, it really should be gender equality. It's not the status of women, it's gender equality in general society. And because of the coalition opposition issues in the government, a man turned out to be the one who will be heading the committee in the parliament for the Committee for Gender Equality. The feminist groups in Israel, many of them disagreed, and a big round of against sounds came out. Personally, I was not against it. I thought it would be very refreshing to have a man handle and lead, and of course observed by all of us, the women and the gender equality groups. And I was hoping that a new angle or new ways of looking would actually result from the fact that he has to be there and do the work together with all of us. I don't know in the end if he remained in this position or not, but in any case, WEPOWER will definitely be spending a lot of time in the coming weeks in the sessions of the Gender Equality Committee in order to progress now that we have a new government. Legislation is very important, is very difficult, and this is what we will do now because we have a fresh government, new parliament members, and maybe a tip to the newcomers. New parliament members are very good partners for new legislation. Before they understand everything that's going on, we can join forces, and hopefully we will have some positive steps forward in the coming weeks. And my last comment is to close with what I started. We need to accelerate. Don't accept the fact that things are going slowly. They should go faster, and they go faster as soon as we decide that we want to see the results here and now. That's it. I think I can finish here.
Okay, thank you very much, Orit. And now we just go into questions. Just a moment. I'll see people really questions.
Okay.
Wait.
Ready?
Just a moment, I'll be ready. Okay, so this is a question from Professor Party Chuber. Ori, do you believe that affirmative action like reservation of seats for women at the local authority level will help in bringing change at higher level with more women in politics in Israel?
Yes, the answer is yes. This is affirmative action is part of this strategy of not having to take the time, but rather push the results in a very fast way. Affirmative action is exactly that legislation that I was telling you about for the seats on the board of directors of governmental companies. There is an affirmative action. It was legislated quite a few years ago, but it was legislated. In the legislation, there's a monitoring factor, a person that is appointed just to make sure that no men are appointed before you have 50% women on the boards of the biggest governmental companies. And so affirmative action, in my mind, is 100% a strong and very effective tool. One good way, if you have a lot of opposition to this legislation, one very good tool is to limit the legislation, let's say, for 10 years and see what's going on, what the reality became after 10 years. This way, also people who are very much against it and don't try maybe obstruct the legislation or oppose the legislation will be less against it because it's limited in time. 10 years should be enough to make a significant change.
Thank you, Orit. I just put your mail for everyone so people will be able to contact you.
With pleasure.
Yes, just a moment. I saw one more question, maybe kind of rhetoric, but anyway. Why actually most of the people think that women are not integral to program and projects planning and design implementation? What do you think the factors that actually makes people think that women are not capable?
Chauvinism, a long history of oppression of women. This is part of the social, the big social problem. Sorry, we are all, I think, we get discrimination against women in our mother's milks. I have to tell you frankly that I myself found myself, not recently, but when I was younger and less proficient with what I do, I also fell for chauvinist reactions. The jokes about the blondes used to make me laugh, about women unable to change a tire. And it took me time to learn to really look at the things and also show it to the people around me. If there is a tire to change, I will not be the first one to say, oh, but women can't do it or whatever. And but the discrimination against women is deep down. Why is it that when a man gets drunk, one of the first things he does is either to try and kill his wife or rape her? Why don't they think to go on a harakiri mission when they're drunk? Why men, they have it so deep in their bodies? We all have it. We are still not free from treating women in a discriminative way. And this is why the more we talk about it, the more good we will do. But we can't kid ourselves. We are still chauvinist societies, and the children from a very young, from the first day. I was going to an English teacher with my grandchild, and the teacher, by mistake, gave my grandchild a pink color to do something. He's 4 years old. She herself pulled it back and gave him a blue one. Now, my grandchild is growing with me as a grandmother, so he likes pink as well. But she didn't even give him a chance. She felt she made a mistake. And he didn't understand why she changed the colors, but nevertheless, he got blue. So it's still, we are still in a long struggle.
No, that's true. Next question is from Sushita Deshpande. In Israeli election, has women considered as a separate vote bank?
Again, as has.
In Israeli election, does women is considered like a separate vote bank, separate force, separate target population?
Yes and no. Yes and no, because on the one hand, there was a kind of a small initiative to run on a women's list, but on the other hand, the recent situation in Israel was that we had elections after elections and everything was very hectic. In fact, there was no time to start anything new. And what was going on was that women were not present in the recent rounds of elections in Israel. Israel is a quite militant society, and the tendency was and still is to vote for high-ranking officers, which again, in their turn, are mostly men, not only, but mostly men. And so this is part of the disappointment that the last rounds, women were not central in the general elections, also because they were very, very central in the local elections. And I think there was a kind of a fatigue from talking about, oh, we need more women. Oh, okay, more women. We heard, we need more women. In reality, it didn't really happen very well.
Okay, thank you. And next question, can you discuss strategies that we can use to include more women in crisis intervention, different types of crises, and especially today in this crisis with COVID-19?
Okay, this issue with our coronavirus is actually, it reflects everything that is going on in all the other platforms or all the other areas. First of all, number one is, as I said before, numbers, facts. We need to see that in every, and this is what we are doing, not just WEPOWER, there are a few other groups that are focused on the presence of women in combating the coronavirus issue today. And number one is, again, facts and numbers. Every gathering, every forum, every discussion that is held, we count the numbers and we put them up. Whether it's us or it's some other groups of women, we use the strategy of data. We put the data in everybody's face. We collect the data and we know. And when we found out that the top committee for combating the coronavirus in Israel had not even one woman just a few weeks ago, all the organizations that are somehow related to gender equality and social fairness, all of us together, we organized each other, we let each other know the facts, and we all demanded more women. And women were introduced into the committee because of the big round of noise that we organized. We needed to get organized. So facts is a very strong strategy, and cooperation, serious cooperation, real cooperation. This is our goal. 30 organizations, 50 organizations, also organizations that are not 100% doing what we're doing. It can be social fairness, it could be promoting democracy, it can be all kinds of other organizations that are all related to improving our social well-being, our societies, our democracy. It's hard work, but it's doable. So facts, cooperation, and lawsuits, which we are now, in WEPOWER, we decided that this is part of what we're going to do now. Simply suing, making lawsuits, and pushing legislation further by new lawsuits. These are the three main strategies that I can think of.
And can you maybe give an examples of successful, let's say, activities of local governments where women leaded local governments that happened through the corona crisis, quarantine, and
okay. For example, one really nice example is the standard of cities who are friendly for women, women-friendly cities, or gender-equal cities. For example, if you have enough women on the city council or women on top positions in the city, you will have more activities to do and more even pedestrian walking designed properly for parents, for young women, and for young mothers and fathers to walk with the babies' trolleys in the city. You will have more playgrounds for children. You will have more business centers in the city for young parents who don't leave homes for many hours. Once you have a city that has the notion of gender equality, suddenly you open up to more community equality kind of activities that help the community work together. You have kindergartens, for example, kindergartens who are open for longer hours so that it's not one parent who has to run fast to take the children out from the kindergarten. In Israel, it's 4 o'clock very often. And very often it's the mother because usually she earns less. And so it's a vicious circle. So women, when they are on the board of directors or in the cities, which we have seen in the cities, the women that are elected are surely ambassadors and facilitators, 100% of activities that make the city more gender equal, more women friendly, more shade, more motherly issues, without leaving out the young fathers, but still more motherly issues, longer hours of daycare centers so that mothers can work fast, more hours, more initiatives to help with children during vacation times. And so yes, women, and even management style, we can see with the mayors that are today sitting in the 14 cities. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller. They're not, some of them are towns, not necessarily cities. But we can see when we look at them, we see different styles of management, more cooperative, more open, more transparent. We see nice things when women are there. Positive things that we would like to see more.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. And the last question, I believe, in spite of party difference, has in Israel women members in parliament came together to pass women-centric bill in the parliament?
Excellent point. In the past, first of all, yes, but not enough. In the past, in like 10 years ago or so, there were quite a few initiatives that were organized by left, right, big, small, whatever colors of parties. And there was a very strong coalition of women, and they have been successful passing a few laws. The last, let's say, 6-7 years, it was not that successful. And we are hoping now, because there is more awareness to the problems to do with legislation for women. One of our missions in WEPOWER, and I know in other organizations like us as well, is that we will try to put together, it's a very good point, it's not a question, it's a very good point that was raised here, to put together a wall-to-wall coalition for women issues, because in the end, and by the way, men are invited to this coalition as well, in order to legislate these general, so much needed laws for gender equality, and I like to call it recently also gender equity.
Okay. By the way, I see this question is still, we're still receiving questions. Okay, let's take a few more minutes. The question from China. In rural China, there is usually, oh, just a moment, I just don't wait.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there is usually a woman director who specializes in women's positions to manage women. Is there such a position in the rural areas of Israel? Rural areas of Israel sounds, yeah. So.
The answer is yes. The answer is that there is a position in every local authority in Israel. There is a position financed by the budget of the city, which is a compulsory position to have, of a woman. Actually, I don't think it has to be a woman, but there is a position of, usually it's by women, that has to handle women issues of the community, of the workers of the city council, and probably also of the city council itself, the elected members. So yes, there is. And as long as we don't have 100% stable equality for men and women, I think we will have to continue to have this kind of monitor slash watchdog slash facilitator, depends how this person works. It can work by different strategies. It can be a watchdog. It can be a facilitator that will move and, do things together and promote things in a natural, maybe a softer way. It can be someone who will actually come and demand a revolution. And if that person has the power to push a revolution, let it be a revolution. Usually it's not. And usually it is appointed by the mayor. And so it's not very big revolutions, but it moves things quite effectively. This is one of our WEPOWER channels to go into training in the different localities. That person usually is the connector or the agent through which we go into the city.
Thank you. And one more point. You mentioned about women earning less and among everything doing sometimes more. Do you think women are getting to some professional and important decision-making spaces, but not being able to go further? For example, C-levels, is this an issue in Israel? How women can
Yes,
go further?
Unfortunately, money seems to be running away from us. How? It's a known fact in the feminist gender equality research that when a profession becomes feminized, when women get into a profession that, for example, used to be men's profession in the past, one of the results is that the level of salaries go down. One very good example in Israel, for example, was teaching, headmasters, school principals. In the past, all the school principals in the far past, principals used to be men. As women got into the profession of being the headmasters, the school principal, the head principal of the schools, the standard of salaries for teachers on the whole started to be relatively lower than the other professions. Also, the prestige sometimes suffers when a lot of women jump and manage to get into a profession, then the prestige of that profession goes a little bit down. A big example in Israel is, for example, judges on the peace courts, the lowest level, the entry level of judges in Israel is the peace court in Israel. And today it's a majority of women, but the prestige has gone down. But this is a process. We fight it. We try to be professional. We try to do our jobs very well. And there are other tools that are helping us, like transparency tools that show us the level of salary to make sure that the woman can actually check if she's doing this position, and a boy and a man, a co-worker, is doing the same job. Today we have the tools to make sure that they're earning the same. But it's a problem, and there is a glass ceiling in many areas. But again, knowing where the glass ceiling is, knowing where the bottleneck is, helps us to tackle it. For example, engineers. We didn't have enough women engineers. We looked at the numbers. They became known to everyone. So suddenly there started programs of all kinds to promote and to have more women, more girls learning engineering and more girls becoming engineers. So it's a process, but we have to work on it. Hard work.
Yes, and Orit, I almost thought I will finish the session, but now I see the question that is so important. We have this issue, women not supporting women, especially in politics. A lot of women will rather encourage men politically. Do you have this experience in Israel, and what do you think we can do? I think it's extremely important issue.
Yes, it's very important, and it's very real to a certain extent. I think it's a natural phenomenon, because when these women are fighting for their position, pushing, elbowing their ways, usually not easily, up the pyramid, you don't want to see other women around you, unfortunately. And it's really, it has to do with your inside morale and moral standards that I have to say, many women do have the moral standards to be fair enough, but when there is a competition between two women, one of them is going to lose and one of them is going to win. So it's a natural phenomenon on the one hand. We do try to make that competition between women to be fair, to be more on abilities and capabilities, and not to become a cat fight. I myself have to say that I experienced both. I had points in life where women promoted me and were very, very generous to me and put the right word and the recommendation. And on the other hand, I had other situations where I confronted women that were ready to kill and just not to see me being promoted rather than them. So it has to do with your own moral issues, I think. And we try to, the women we train and the women we help promote, we try to make them, good people, fair people. It will always remain a problem. This problem will not disappear. Also, men fight. Top pyramid is a very small place.
Yeah, but sometimes we see that men are much more willing to cooperate together against someone
for their own good.
Yeah, yeah.
It's true.
Yes. Okay.
But just not to leave the wrong impression. Women cooperate. We enjoy a lot of cooperation amongst women. As I said, we put together huge cooperative initiatives. And so I think, there are fights, but generally women learned to cooperate, at least in Israel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Orit. I think that with this last question, you will, first of all, you will think how to support your colleagues and to promote women to politics. And thank you, Orit, for giving these strategies and ideas how to do this.
Pleasure.
And hope it was really helpful for you. And thank you, my dear participants, those with whom we met and the new ones, for joining us, for being with us. Please don't forget that you can check on our social networks our new and upcoming sessions on different topics. Please be with us, and thank you very much again.
Bye, see you.
And as I said, you have the email of Orit. You can ask her questions directly. You can write to us, and we'll really be happy to assist you to gain new ideas from you for our new sessions. So thank you very much, and good luck in your political movements.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.